book container gardening, feel free to, and if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Lana, you're welcome to introduce yourself yet if you want to. But otherwise, I'm going to get started and start sharing my screen. But feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have questions, if you want to put it in the chat, or if you want to just interrupt me and ask, feel free. Awesome. All right. We're going to start off with Garden in a Pot is what I called the class, but that was a great name. Like I said, I work with DeKalb County Community Gardens. I'm not sure if you're familiar with our program or with our organization. So we have community gardens all over the county and then different aspects of our garden as well. So the first part of our organization would include Walnut Grove, and that's kind of where we get all our plants from, as well as they sell a box of hope, which is like a CSA or a box that you can get each week of produce. And so there's still some left if anyone's interested in spring and fall for this month of June, and then we'll be at the end of the summer as well. There's also a vocational farm, which means adults with special needs run and do a lot of the work in the garden, and they really love coming out there and just getting their hands dirty. And so they also sell seedlings as well, which is where I got some of the seedlings for the class today that I'll be demonstrating with. And yeah, and so they have all kinds of cool things, veggies, and then also some of the fruits and vegetables go into the next part that I will talk about shortly. There's also Dolce Vita that's located in, I think it's right in Sycamore, yeah, technically. It's behind Dolce Vita Salon, and it is kind of more of an urban garden actually, and it's really beautiful if you want to stop by because it's right in town, if that's where you live. And it also grows veggies like a high production rate as well for our Grow Mobile truck. So our Grow Mobile truck has different spots around the county. And sorry, I'm just gonna ask, can you guys still see me? Okay. The Grow Mobile has different spots around the county that it gives food for people who are in need of the food. One of them is like University Village or Westminster are two of the stops. And so it comes about once a month in each one of those places. And then we also have the community gardens around the, you can rent out a plot anywhere in the community. They're all over. Excuse me for a second. And so you can go ahead and rent a plot there. And then Genoa Hub as well, that's located, as you can say in the name, Genoa, and it's a food pantry. And then there's the Kitchen Mobile, and that will be something that we'll be piloting this season. It'll be giving out SNAP benefits, food for SNAP that you can purchase with SNAP benefits. That's fresh produce from our farms. And then the school gardens, which I also manage as well, and the University Village gardens. So the school gardens, we have education programs throughout the school year, and then we're growing gardens at each one of the elementary and middle schools. And then the University Village also has a garden that I manage all three of the last ones. Right, so we're going to talk about a little gardening benefits. Not only the gardening is really good for the earth because it helps it helps mitigate some of the impact or some of the things that are happening to our earth and to us. So it helps mitigate some of those things from climate change or the climate crisis that are happening. And it also takes care of the earth by building up the soil with organic matter, which is really important for us to be able to grow food in the future. there are many different ways it benefits the earth, as well as bringing pollinators, a place for pollinators. That could go on forever. It also is good for the body, so meant for our mind and body. It's supposed to have some really good relaxing benefits to get your hands on the ground, as well as physical exercise for the body. So it's really good for you kind of all around. Great. So we're going to talk about supplies for our container gardening class. And so you're going to start with a pot or container, compost or soil, gravel, small rocks, and then scissors or a knife, a drill, and then seedlings. The last three are maybe not so necessary, but great to have, as well as seeds. You want those. And labels. All right, and so it's time to get creative. So I'm going to show you some examples and things to get you kind of thinking about different ways and different containers you could put some pots in, just kind of some fun things. First, let's start off with what to look in a container. So the larger the container, the better. I would say in general, you want to make sure you have room for roots. So you're thinking that the size of the plant on top will kind of be the size of the pot, or the roots will kind of be the same size of the plant that you're seeing on top. It's kind of a rough picture to look in your head for this, how much space you want in your container. And that you want to, your plant may be small now, but just thinking about how big it's going to get, that's going to have space to grow into. The happier it's going to be, the more space it has. For vegetables as well, you're going to want to be thinking about that, especially they're going to need the most space. And herbs, and we'll get into it more later. You want to think that your pot has good drainage, so that you want to make sure maybe you're poking holes in the bottom, making sure it has holes, and that it's also very durable to hold your plant as well for long haul. Unless you're only doing it for a short period of time, then you could do a biodegradable pot. And so here's some ideas for your container. You could use different containers, such as a juice container, like from a large juicy juice gallon, soda container, like a large thing of that as well, or like a milk carton or a milk gallon. You could do cans and cut the tops off of those. Be careful with the sharp parts, of course. You could do water bottles like we had in the picture earlier, a gallon ice cream bucket, which is great, shoes, like an old shoe, and kitchen Tupperware, like maybe a Chinese to-go container for some really shallow rooted plants, and then tires as above, 5-gallon pail. So just making sure that you can put holes in all these things and that the water can drain out. It's some really fun ideas. Like I said, we're getting creative and just really having fun with it. So I'm going to introduce you in case you don't know this guy already. His name is Ron Finley. He lives in, I think it's South Central LA. And he is like the master of container gardening and growing plants in any space that people would typically tell you not to. He's really inspiring to me. Because he actually started planting all kinds of plants, as you can see in the median or in the space between your sidewalk and the curb that you have to maintain anyways. And it was kind of, you know, against what he could do legally by what the county or the city wanted. And so he got a notice for, like, I think it was his arrest or something. Which is really crazy, because he was growing plants in that space instead of grass. And so he took basically a dead space, which is grass because it doesn't really do anything too much, and we add chemicals to it, and basically made a living food forest for everyone to check out as they walk by, as well as eat. So we're gonna watch a quick video about him. He's really inspiring, so I'd love to hope that inspires you as well. Here is the picture real quick of his backyard. So he took a swimming pool and filled it with all kinds of container gardening pots of all different sizes and shapes and containers, and made it a food forest. So, all right, we're gonna start with a video.
Gardens build community, period. It's funny to be on the other side of the fence and just hear the comments. You know, people guessing what stuff is, just ooh and ah. Seeing somebody out here at 6 in the morning standing in the street just looking at the sunflowers, I mean, that's what it's here for. Just because of how people look at them and when they see them and just how it changes their mood. I didn't want it to be symmetrical. I didn't want it to everything to be lined up. I want it to be like a forest. I like to live on the edge, so I plant mint where you're not supposed to. These are seed pods, and these things, the seeds are in here. The wind takes them all over the place, and you'll wind up with broccoli 2 blocks away, and people wonder why. I didn't plant no broccoli. How the hell did I get broccoli? Plants want to live, you know, and they're gonna morph, and they're gonna do things, and they're gonna follow the sun. Everything they can do to survive. They let you know what they want. They let you know what they need. And I'm providing an environment where they can live. To me, it's like my solace right now. Plants change people. I have conversations with people that I've seen for years that I would never imagine. This takes some people back home because a lot of people are from the South and now they're living in apartment buildings where they used to be on land. I had people that would drive by and say, I just wanted my mom to see your garden. Hey, look, Mom, this is what you used to do, I guess. And they knew that their mom would, you know, feel good about seeing this. There's an elderly Japanese guy, and he would come early in the morning, and he would just walk the paths. I mean, slow. He would just walk the paths of the garden, and he's in his 80s, and he doesn't speak English. He just walk in the garden. So we, you know, found a way to communicate sign language, and he brought me some plants that he wanted me to grow. I found a mother and a daughter out here at 10:30 at night. You don't just go somewhere at 10:30 at night, especially over here in somebody's garden at 10:30 at night, unless you really need it. And it hurt me, it made me sad, you know. And I told him, you know, take what you want. Why should there be people hungry here? One plant will give you 1,000, 2,000, 20,000 seeds. We have the land to plant them. If you look down the streets here, you see all this brown grass and grass, when you can be feeding people. They call areas like this throughout the United States, you know, food deserts. I thought, you know, why not have food forests?
So I just think that's inspiring to talk about maximizing your growing space in all parts, and really the power of gardening and how it brings people together. And it's kind of like a rebel movement. They call Ron Findley the guerrilla gardener because he calls it gangster, or gangster garden, I believe that's it. And anyways, I could go on about him again. But here's some pictures from when I lived in Spain, and I just found these on the street and I thought they were really cool, so I wanted to show you guys just kind of some fun things that you can do with container gardening. These are just pots that have shoes around them. They're not actually growing on these shoes, but they just look really fun. Here's some pants that have pots inside of them, so they look like they're growing out of the pants. I'm sure you guys have seen there's like ways you could hang different pots with like macrame or different string kind of from your ceiling if you want to maximize your growing space, especially in the winter time, and just surround your whole area in your building or in front of your window or patio inside with plants. And here's another picture from when I was in Spain, and there was the way they really maximize their balcony space. If that's something that limits you, there's so many different places and ways you can grow plants. Here's a bunch of different pictures of different containers as well that people just reuse different animal, tidy cat kind of containers, and we're growing plants in them. And these ones are really cute. We're using different things like drawers and making them a growing space as well, and could be put outside very easily. So let's start with what you want to do to prepare a pot. So first you want to create holes in the bottom using maybe a knife, scissors, or drill, depending upon what you have. So here's an example of what I did. I started off with a juicy juice container that I went on a walk and found outside my, in my backyard, I guess you could say, because there's so much trash laying around. And so I washed it out and reused it. And then a milk jug that I also found in my backyard, just going on a walk. So we went from trash to making something growing out of it, which is like a really cool image to think about. And I drilled holes with a drill on the left side, and then I used the knife on the right side. So something you want to make sure when doing this is that you're, one, being careful, but also that the holes are going outside so that the water can easily get out. So if you can see kind of an up close shot, how I made them poking out so the water can easily get out and drain. So starting with creating holes in the bottom so that the water gets out when you water it. That way you can give it a good water and not have to worry about it, the water building up and causing mold or something to grow in the bottom. And then you want to put gravel or rocks in the bottom and then fill with soil and then plant a seed or seedling. So those are the steps we're going to go through. So here's a picture of a side angle of the pot, basically filled with soil and gravel. So you're going to fill the bottom of the container with about 1 to 2 inches if it's like a large container. Otherwise, just kind of fill the bottom if it's a smaller container with just gravel. I took some from my apartment landscaping, don't tell my landlord. And so for the soil, you want to find maybe some compost or some potting mix with perlite particularly. So the perlite is like, prevents compaction. It makes it porous, the soil, and then also adds, aids in water retention and drainage. So it kind of just gives the soil that it's not going to be compacted as sitting in the pot for a while. So that's what you're looking for in a potting mix. And then you want to leave a small gap at the top of the plant just so that the water doesn't run over and the soil pours out. And then you want to wet the soil before you're adding the plants in so that you're not having to flood the pot and like the plant goes floating away. But you'll of course want to water after. So a good measurement for this is that you squeeze the soil and then to see if it's wet enough. And if it forms a small ball and then it doesn't fall apart easily, that's kind of a good measurement to see if your soil is wet enough before you planted it. So we're starting off with different kinds of plants that you're looking for when you're gonna plant in a pot. So at the end of this presentation, I'll have like a bunch of resources for you guys that I can share with you, or I can share the presentation if you guys are interested as well. And so that you can have these resources and go back if you're interested in really doing this and having kind of notes to reference. So we're going to start with the different varieties that you're going to be looking for, which are usually dwarf, patio, or bush. So there's certain basically varieties that have been grown for years on end and bred to be made for planting in a pot. So you kind of want to be looking for dwarf, patio, or bush. Those are the types. So it's like going to be on the little tag. So it's going to be on the little tag that you're looking at. So that comes in the seedling or the seed. So different varieties that you can grow include cherry tomatoes. So this is a great one because they're just a smaller plant, great, delicious tomato no matter what. There's more to pick when you do get them, but here are a couple different varieties of those that you could get. Then there's bush tomatoes as well, which would be like a larger tomato if you don't just want to plant cherry tomatoes. And then there's, again, you're looking for the dwarf and patio and bush for these ones as well. Eggplant, that one will be great. Looking for a patio, baby and fairy tale, and then cucumbers, peppers, and carrots. And these are all the different varieties they could look for. The Thumbelina is actually turns out to be like a little ball instead of like a long carrot. So if you're looking for something different, it's always something fun. And the fairy tale is very beautiful as well for the eggplant. On to planting. So the seedlings, when you're putting them and arranging them in your pot, you don't want to overcrowd them. So you can see in this picture here, we have like 3 or 4 tomatoes, and as well as lettuce and all these different plants. We should probably only have 1 tomato in this pot, and that's all. So you want to make sure you have enough space for your plant to grow. And it's not overshaded and has enough roof space. Tomato plants can get pretty big, so the more room, the better again. So you probably want to do only 1 seedling per medium pot, unless you have a really big pot, and depending upon what you're growing, then you can add more. But if you had a lot of space somehow this season, you can always add more to your pots next year. Most plants are going to put in at ground level, except tomatoes. For tomatoes, you're going to, depending upon how high, how tall they are. The tomatoes I have growing today, we probably won't have to worry about, but if they end up being really, should have been planted earlier, really tall, you might want to do it about halfway. You're going to take off, I can show you later, but that's what you're going to be doing. All right, if you're doing seeds, you want to follow the directions on the seed packet. It's the easiest way to go. And there are 2 different ways to plant seeds. So it's going to tell you everything you need to know on the seed packet, which is really brilliant. It's kind of like cheating. You don't really have to know a whole lot about it. But there's 2 different ways to spread seeds. So if you have smaller seeds, and depending on the plant, things like carrots and things like that, you would use a method called broadcasting, which basically means that you take all the small seeds and just kind of shake them out of your hand as you go, and kind of let them be planted a little bit closer to each other in clumps. Lettuce would be the best example for that as well, that you're just there can be more plants kind of really close to each other, and so the plant is going to do well. You do that for herbs as well. And then versus the larger seeds, it kind of tends to be that you are going to space them out kind of like in the picture above, maybe a couple inches apart. It'll tell you on the seed packet again, but that's something you want to do for like beans and peas. Those are going to be spaced out. But if you do space out those say carrots a little bit more, then you wouldn't have to go back and what we call thinning and take out some of the plants if you planted too many, too thick, the broadcasting. So in general, you're just thinking about how much space is a full-grown carrot going to take, and how far away should I plant it from another one, and that's the thing with the bean plant, which is maybe hard to know if you're starting growing. So once you put the seeds in, you're going to cover up with soil, and then you're going to pat it down just a little bit, and then water the seeds. And label them with markers, so that, especially if they're seeds, you know exactly where you planted them and what. So here's a chart of examples of what to plant by seed and what by seedling. So you want to plant by seed leafy greens. So a great one to plant in pots is spinach. You can plant that pretty close to each other, as well as lettuce, kale, Swiss chard, and collards. Those are really great container gardening ones. They don't require a ton of root space and a great place to start, and delicious and really great because you didn't have to have any chemicals, and it's all organic and you know exactly what it went on it. You may not even have to wash it if you don't want to. But I would still suggest washing it, but if you're living that wild life. And then there's herbs as well that you could plant by seed. Cilantro and chives are a good one. Other herbs you might want to get by seedling, but you wouldn't have to. Most herbs you can plant from seed. Root vegetables you should also grow by seed, because you should put those directly in the ground and they won't want to be disturbed once they're in the ground. And then other vegetables such as peas and beans, you'll also plant by seed. And then the seedlings, you'll want to get tomatoes and peppers and eggplants for sure, because this gives them a head start for the season to go ahead and get going. And they really like those warm temperatures. And the cucumbers and zucchini would also want to get as a seedling, as well as basil. You wouldn't have to get basil, but it's probably preferred if you have access to it. And here's a link to all the seeds that you, when to sow your seeds. So plant and pot size matching. So deciding what to plant, what size plant to put in what size pot. So a half gallon or less would be great for herbs, lettuce, and spinach, as well as edible flowers, nasturtiums, chives, marigolds, and violets. Pretty fun that you can eat and have a beautiful flower and maybe put on your salad or something as a beautiful display. So a really cool thing to do with container gardening is microgreens. So microgreens is basically when you take lettuce or Swiss chard, kale, arugula, you could do radish sprouts, alfalfa sprouts, sunflower sprouts. So if you take any of these things, a great example is Swiss chard and kale, or Swiss chard and kale to start with. You basically would plant it very, I want to say very thick. You're going to put more seeds in there than you usually would in your pot. And so that it's very thick in comparison to how you'd only put probably one Swiss chard seed in the pot at a time for it to have space to grow. But you're growing them microgreen style, so you're going to put them really thick in your pot, the seeds, put a lot of them in there. And then you're going to basically pick them as little baby plants when their leaves are really small, and they're supposed to be more nutritious to eat this way, as well as just like really soft and extra tasty, because you're just eating the baby plant, and it's before it gets really large and really tough to eat when it's grown bigger. But it's of course still good that way too. If you have more questions at the end, I love talking about that part. Here's a picture of the plants planted, the seeds planted very thick, you can see. So you can just take and cut off basically the tops of each one of these leaves, and then you can have a second harvest as well, maybe a third if it doesn't get too bitter and comes right back. So for medium-sized pots, about a gallon size is what I'm talking about. You can put in radishes, Swiss chard, collards, kale, strawberries. Maybe if you want to grow these in a bigger quantity, or like a normal size quantity for the Swiss chard, collards, and kale, as well as strawberries, peas, green onions, and beans. Here's a picture of a really fun idea with putting in your windowsill, plants in your windowsill. It's pretty fun. So there's so many different places that you can have fun putting plants and growing. And then the final one is a larger pot, 2 gallon or more, I would classify that as. And you can see over here to the side some examples of large pots that have tomatoes, and I think it's cucumbers or a squash, and then it looks like peppers growing in there. So that's the example I'm using. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and cucumbers are great for this size. You want to have a lot of space if you're going to grow squash. It can be a really big plant. So like for a zucchini or a winter squash. And then if you're going to grow carrots, if you're going to grow any root crops, maybe start with carrots. Once you have the carrots down, then you move on to the beets, garlic, and turnips. So you want to make sure you have a lot of depth. The plants are really deep. The pots have a lot of depth to them, so that they have enough room for all the roots and the full vegetable when you're planting them, if you're planting it in the pot. So we're going to talk about support. So there's different vegetables that need support that you're going to put in the garden. Tomatoes, you could use cages or stakes with rope going or twine going from one to the other. Excuse me. And then cucumbers and peas, you could use a tripod kind of method, and then we'll come back to that. So you can see to the right some like kind of a tripod example. They're taking like 3 sticks and then putting like a little string around them to basically let the cucumber plant, I believe that's cucumber, grow up the trellis that they made so that it has somewhere for its vine to grow as it continues to get older. And then you can also do where you have 1 stake on both sides and then try to basically make a support system or trellis for the tomato to hold on to. And then so those are the ones that you'd probably want to do for. Peas, you'll need not a lot of like a really sturdy support. They don't have much weight, but tomatoes are going to get bigger and will be really great to have. So I'm going to show you the care for basil a little bit later. Here's some more examples of the tomatoes and some great options for pots and supporting. And there's an example of the tripods with just some sticks from the backyard. So for taking care of your plants, you just want to pay attention to what your plants look like throughout the season. So you're just kind of seeing, is it looking happy? Is it looking sad? If it has looking kind of droopy, then you might need to give it more water. If the plant, as long as the soil is feeling damp, you're probably good. So you give it a good water once it's looking dry, and once it's dry again, you come back to it. A great test for this is if you feel the soil and how it's feeling. If it's feeling moist, don't worry about it. Make sure that you water the plants a lot because plants in pots dry out quite easily. So it might need more watering than the average garden. But you also don't want to overwater it so that the soil is having problems and the plant is gonna have problems with its roots and things like that. And I really love this picture of a colander. It has a great example for drainage because of all the holes that it will have in it. And so it's just really a fun idea, again, an example that you can do. So if you're gonna have your plants inside throughout the winter, if you have herbs or something that I can continue to have throughout the winter, then you might want to add compost to kind of aid in its growth and take care of it throughout the season and make sure that it still has enough nutrients so it'll help it to grow a little bit better, and then you can water that compost in. Maybe every couple of months when it seems to kind of be stunted in growth. And then you also might want to add, repot your plants into a bigger plant as you go as well. If you started with a really tiny container, as your plant gets bigger, depending upon what you're growing. So here's the resources that I had talked about, all the links for the main site that I use is the Old Farmer's Almanac. It has a lot of great references, and these are pretty much all from there. So I highly recommend it if you have any gardening questions, a great reliable resource to go to. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to do a couple planting, do a little planting. So you'll have to let me know if you can't see me, but I'm going to see if I can get this set up real quick so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay. Too bad I don't have a tripod. That looks great. Okay. So I have different plants started. I started about a month ago. I did this class with our organization. And so here's some examples of pots that I've been growing for a month in a container. Starting off with a tomato plant. This is about a 2-gallon container, and it's looking great. I've just been leaving this on my patio, and here's a full picture of it. These are cherry tomatoes, and they look like they have some tomatoes that are ready to grow. Very exciting. And then we have a cucumber plant that is looking beautiful. This is also a 2-gallon plant. And I have a trellis, you can see part of it here, that can start kind of growing up with its little trendles, or I always say that wrong. And it'll start growing up here and be very happy. The really cool thing about this is that the cucumber plant will grow up, and then it will leave a really nice vine that will look really beautiful. But it also will be a great opportunity to kind of see the cucumber plants and easily spot them as they're going, rather than kind of having more of a mess of plant all over the pot. It'll be really nice and neat, and it'll also be a great benefit to prevent from disease and water just kind of sitting and hanging out on the plant. And so easy to find the cucumbers. And then I have some basil plants that I've been growing for a month as well, since I did this container gardening class. I have some cilantro that looks like it could get repotted or replanted soon, because cilantro only grows for so long before you have to replant it. I have, it's actually a garlic chive, and then as well as some oregano growing in it. And those are looking great as well. So we're gonna start off with some basil. I may have to get a little bit closer for this. So we're gonna start off talking about the basil. For the basil, the best way to make sure you're taking care of it, the leaves might start to get bitter and start to flower, which means not focusing on creating your herb or your, basically what you're trying to grow is the leaves. So the best way to take care of the plant is you pinch off basically the top leaves that look like they're starting to flower. You'll know that they're starting to flower when they're getting kind of clumpy and tiny at the top. And so you can see this flower here. And yeah, so this is the first, you want to do the first two kind of opposite leaves that are coming from each side. So that's kind of, how do you, yeah. the leaves that are kind of going from one angle and then the other. So this is like the first part, the first sprig that you can call of the basil. And this is how you take care of it. It seems kind of like you're killing the plant because it's not growing upwards, but it'll grow sideways instead, which is what you're kind of training the plant to grow. So I'm just taking off the top 2 leaves or so of the plant that kind of look like they're about to flower. And so this is how you harvest all the plants, all the leaves that are starting to, that you want to, when you want to eat it, as well as take care of it. So I'll probably save the rest for later, but this is a great spot so that I was saving my basil from flowering. And then this leaves me some great basil for making pizza tonight. And so I can go ahead and put the basil, my oregano, and then my fresh tomatoes on my pizza tonight. It'll be really delicious. So now we're gonna repot some basil. Or not repot, we're gonna plant some basil in a pot. So starting off, as you can see in the one that I planted here, I don't know if you can see actually, there is 2 plants that I've planted. So it seems to be growing really well and be spaced out enough for them to both grow and be happy. I wouldn't put too much more because they're just going to continue to get bigger. And so this is like 1 gallon pot that I'm starting with. So I'm starting with my soil. Excuse me. So I'm going to start off with my soil. And like I had described in the PowerPoint earlier, is you want to make sure that the moisture of the soil is moist enough that you can put your plant in it, but also like it's better to have it wet. It's not really going to hurt it if it's wet. So just decide that you're going to mix in some water with it. Can't see me. So I have some soil in this container, and I would say I'm going to add a little bit more water, like I said. So the more water you have and the more moist your soil is, I think the better really, especially when you're just starting to plant. It's better to start off with moist soil so that you're not having to flood your plant and make it kind of float away out of your pot. So, and it's just going to want a lot of water to start off. So I have my pitcher of water. I'm going to add a little bit of water. And then I'm going to mix it in and see how it's going. If you only have had 45 minutes tonight to spend with us, I know I only said 45 minutes. It was really nice hanging out with you. But otherwise, stick around if you can. And we'll finish planting some pots and have questions at the end if anyone has any. And again, feel free to ask any questions as we're going and putting in the chat or stopping and interrupting me. So right now, I am just taking the soil and kind of breaking it up. There's going to be some clumps in the soil. And so you're going to want to break those up so the plants have a nice place to grow. So I'm going to fill up my pot. And put some soil in the bottom. So let's start with this one. So I'm filling it up. And I already have some gravel in the bottom. So I know I'm going to want to plant this fairly, I don't know, put the first part of the plant in because it's kind of tall already. For the basil plant, not too deep, just a little bit. So I'm not going to fill it up completely all the way to save room for my plant. So I'm going to take one of these tall guys, taking them out of my little tray here. So what you want to do is you're gonna take the roots. You're gonna kind of like rip out basically the outside of the roots. This kind of frees up the roots so that they have space to grow, and they'll just kind of start growing away. I call it liberating them, making them free to be who they want to be. And I'm just going to take off maybe the 2 bottom leaves if they're not looking so good. And I'm going to go ahead and plant. So I'm going to add a little bit more soil because it's not all the way to the top yet. Then I'll show you in a minute. I could probably put 2 in here, like I said earlier. I'm just going to start with 1. And that looks pretty good. Lots of space for this guy to grow if I just leave him in here by himself. And so here you go. You can see here's my potted plant. And pretty soon I would probably take the top off just because it looks like it might flower soon. As you can see, they're kind of tight, small. I would say you're good for the season for answering your question in the chat that if you start off with good planting soil and compost or potting soil, that you shouldn't have to worry about adding compost throughout just the growing season if you're doing vegetables, because you're just going to have them most likely on your patio throughout the summer. It's a little bit hard to grow vegetables inside, but you can definitely do lettuce and herbs and things like that. Those are great to grow. But if you did want to do vegetables, this would probably be another class. Then you can go ahead and get grow lights, and that will work great. I planted the first part of the plant, of the basil plant, kind of in there. It should be fine, just kind of how it is. I didn't plant it very deep. For the most part, you can plant most plants kind of at ground level. That's a general rule. There's exceptions to the rule, as there always is to every rule. And then I'm gonna go ahead and plant a tomato plant. And so here's our tomato plants. These are bred perfusion. My coworker dropped them off for me from our farm. She's pretty smart, so she got me a great patio plant. So the best way to get them out of these little trays is to, really this is the best way if I'm gonna cheat. So the best way is to do it, especially if you're explaining to kids, if you're gonna garden with kids, is you're gonna take your hand, catch it in the cracks between your fingers, take them wide, and then you're gonna put them both on both sides of, you can't see very well. And you're gonna put them on both sides of the plant and kind of catch it as it falls up. So I'm holding both the pot and the plant, and then I'm gonna squeeze the bottom, alternating the bottom till I kind of pop it out and the roots come free from the container. And not quite yet. This is a great way to do it, especially for just starting out, so that you're just not accidentally bending the tomato plant or any plant, especially more fragile plants like flowers, right away. And these roots are all bound together. So they've been growing in here for a while. I have to kind of rip them apart from the other plants. Ripping roots seems like something that is really unnatural, like, oh no, I don't want to hurt the plant, but surprisingly, it's good for them. So we're going to start with that. Ripping the outside of the roots. And then I'm going to do something kind of unique with the tomato plant. Something that, again, you might think was harming it. So here I have the tomato plant. And I'm actually going to take off all the bottom roots, all the bottom like branches of the tomato plant. So this might seem like you're hurting the plant, but it's actually helping the plant grow upright. So with tomato plants, we want them to grow upright and kind of focus on the upright growth because this helps ventilation in preventing water from growing and from staying on the plant and causing diseases. So tomato plants tend to have this thing called an upright, I call it the upper armpit. So it's kind of in the upper part where the branch is growing. There's going to be a little, what we call a sucker that grows right in the top part of the branch, right above the normal branch. Well, we can, there's a lot to talk about tomato plants, but that gives you an idea. So you can see here, I took off basically the bottom leaves, or the bottom branches and leaves. And I'm going to plant this pretty far on the ground. This one is actually a really good size. It's not super root bound. It's great for planting. Sometimes when you get to this part of the season, the tomatoes are going to be like super tall and you're going to plant about halfway, pretty like half of the plant and pretty deep so that you're giving a lot of support for the tomato plants, and the roots will really come from all this stem. These little hairs will all become a root once it hits the soil. So as you can see, yeah, I'm going to put it pretty deep. So I already have a little bit of soil in the gravel at the bottom, and I'm just kind of going to continue to add in the soil. And kind of holding my plant so that it kind of stays where I want it to. And filling it up so that it is about halfway, a little less for this one because this guy is doing great. And we're almost filled. All right, and I'll show you guys. And you can also take the bottom branches off with scissors. That makes you a little bit more comfortable. It'd be more of a clean cut. So here you can see, and ideally I would probably want to plant this in a 2-gallon pot, but I did not have any more. So we'll see. I have one up there. I'm growing in a smaller pot. This is probably when I'm going smaller than it, but 2-gallon pot would be ideal for this one. And so here we have it growing. You can see it's pretty far down there. Just kind of the top is hanging out. And I have the soil that it's below enough the pot rim so that you can still water it without the water and the soil overflowing. So, oh, and here's just a quick thing. Here's the pot that you saw earlier, and I have the soil or the gravel in them. They're kind of fun. I cut them, made them real nice, and just waiting for soil and a plant to grow inside. And of course, don't forget, you want to make sure that you have water to water your plants once you have them planted.
It does look like we have another question. It says, do you pack the soil down? How loose should the soil be around the plant?
Yeah, so the soil is going to naturally become compacted as you water as you continue to water your plant. So I would not compact your soil any more than you need to just have it kind of standing up. You can just kind of take your hands on both sides of the plant and just kind of push it down just a little bit on both sides to make sure it's like kind of supportive and standing up nice so that your plant's not like, you know, leaning over. And so it looks, as I like to say, happy and standing upright. And it's the same for tomatoes. You're going to want to just make sure it's supported on both sides. and kind of just patting, you cannot see that. Just kind of patting down on both sides and supporting it with your hands, and that's about all. You don't really want to compact it more than you have to. That's usually what we're trying to avoid. And then as the water continues to drain down, it's going to compact the soil. And so you don't have to worry about that. You want to make sure your roots have nice loose soil to continue to grow and stretch out as much as they can in a pot. I'm sorry, there was another question. I didn't catch it, but I have dirty hands, so I can't touch my computer.
No, you're all good. It says 2-gallon pot is big enough for a regular tomato plant, like a celebrity, early girl, or other kind of slicing tomato. What type of tomato did you plant in that pot? Will it grow and flourish on the deck?
Yeah, the red perfusion, which is like a patio type tomato, that is the one that I grew. I believe, this is a cherry tomato. I can't remember the exact time of it that I have right here growing already. Cherry tomatoes are always good, but refer back to the slide that I had earlier if you have any more questions about like the varieties of tomato to grow. I would make sure you kind of look up online to make sure you have a smaller one that might grow better. I think they will survive, but may not be ideal if you have one that's like usually meant to be grown in the garden. So just make sure you have a really big pot if you're gonna do one that's like kind of not intended for growing patio or in a pot, if that makes sense. And then you're gonna wanna make sure you have like a tomato cage and everything for the tomatoes, especially if you're going a variety, or stake both sides of it. Like I was talking about earlier, that just means that you would put like a stake on both sides, like a big metal stake or a wooden one if you don't have a metal one. And then you just have string that goes, basically would wrap around from each side and support the stem, because the tomato is going to want to like slump over and like basically lay on the ground if it's not supported, depending upon the tomato. And then it will just start to grow roots from its branches, because it's like a vine essentially. Are there any more questions? No more questions? All right. Well, thank you all for asking questions and showing up. And I hope